Добрый день. Начинаем.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin shortly. Shall we wait for 3 more minutes for everybody to join us?
Ну, давайте начнем, пока люди будут
I
подключаться.
suggest that we begin while everybody is connecting to us, while everybody is connecting to us on Zoom. Also, a lot of people are joining us on social media.
Мы рады всем.
We are very happy to welcome all of you. We are very welcome. We are very happy to welcome all of you, our dear guests of the Russian Case program. Quick reminder that today it's our third meeting out of a series of daily meetings, afternoon meetings, as part of the program The Russian Case Online. On the 1st of April, we also had an informal conversation with Marina Davidova, curator of the Russian Case this year. That was an introductory conversation about the program, which hopefully helped you navigate the variety of the shows we suggest, because we understand that, of course, it is impossible to watch all the shows over the course of 6 days. All registered guests have access to all the shows in the program. The online format is, of course, a forced decision. We had to make it due to the circumstances, but there are some advantages to it too. And I suggest that we bear in mind the gift of the online format. We managed to do something new, which we haven't managed to do over the course of the previous 22 years. Now we can show almost all the performances that the curators selected in the form of videos provided by theaters. Also, the online format helped us broaden the reach.
Представители международных театральных
We
фестивалей.
accredited for the program representatives on international festivals, our partners, representatives of different venues, but also a wide range of theater professionals and theater students who requested the permission to watch the shows. Another thing to say is that the next meeting will be tomorrow, and we will have the final meeting on Tuesday. All of the meetings, all of the events take place at 1 p.m. You're welcome to choose simultaneous interpretation into English. We're going to have first the official part of the meeting, which will be broadcast online on YouTube and on social media. And then we will switch to an informal conversation here on Zoom, and we will ask the attendees to join us as panelists, and they will be welcome to unmute themselves. As Marina said, today we have a very hot topic, so to speak, and we have great speakers. Now I'm passing the mic to Marina Davidova. She's a theater critic, she's chief director, she's chief editor of the Theater magazine, and for us, she's the main person behind the Russian Case this year. Thank you very much, Tamara. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you. All I can see now are speakers, and hopefully we have some attendees to you already. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope that you know the topic of today's discussion already. We're going to talk about censorship. We're going to discuss censorship in the arts, not censorship as such, but censorship in arts in particular. How we understand censorship, how we interpret this word, this concept, how we will interact with censorship, how can we interact with it. And I think that today we have a great panel. I'm very happy to see the participants. When I was inviting the guests, I knew that they had different views on the issue, and I think it will be a very fruitful conversation because they will offer different perspectives. And besides that, they are important agents of the theater stage. We have Alvis Homanis with us, artistic director on the Nomadic Theater and a director who does not need any introduction, really. Timofey Kulabin, chief director of the Krasny Fakel Theater in Novosibirsk, also a director who is known internationally. Zhenya Berkovich, a director, a
английском переводе.
female director,
Создательница независимой группы
and
«Дочери Сосо», правильно, да,
a
Жень?
founder of So Daughters, an independent theatre company. And I believe that she is a representative of the new generation of the Russian theater,
Общеевропейской и мировой известности. Ну, так мне кажется.
which I think will soon gain a lot of recognition internationally.
Для начала
I will
я
be very happy to see her further success. To begin with, I really hate making a statement at the beginning of a discussion, so I don't really like to start with a statement which will provoke the discussion. I prefer to start with a question, a real question. I'm really curious about what you think.
и просто задам вопрос.
But today,
Словатый на первый взгляд.
I want to start with a question which is very straightforward. So I want us first to gain a common ground. What do we understand by censorship? When we say this word, do we mean just bans, restrictions, limitations, policies that are issued by the state, by the authorities, by civil servants? Or when we say censorship, I mean, we all can understand this word differently. What do we mean by censorship? Do we also call censorship certain limitations imposed on artistic work? Maybe the limitations imposed by the demands of the society? So, do public groups censor our work? Can it be called censorship?
Прекрасно.
By social groups, I mean people who have a certain social weight and social capital and have their own perception of the beautiful and the ugly, or what can be done and what cannot be done, what can be insulting
Такой
and what is neutral.
бой даже. Вот. Можем ли мы вот так расширенно вообще трактовать слово «цензура»? Да? И
And
что каждый из вас вообще...
how can we understand the term censorship? How do you, every one of you, understand this concept? I think this is the best way to proceed. First, to agree about the terms we use.
Тонкость, да, Алдос Хермис, насколько я понимаю, будет говорить
Elvis, as far as I understand, is going to speak English because he's more comfortable with English and he finds it more natural. And we are going to speak Russian.
Я никого не буду вызывать к доске,
I'm
да,
not going to call out your names, so you're welcome to jump in whenever you are ready.
но, может быть, все-таки для начала я попрошу Алвиса сказать какие-то слова.
Maybe I will turn to Elvis first, if that's okay. Elvis, hi.
И вы говорите по
Ой, я плохо очень слышу.
Sorry, Elvis, we can't really hear you. The internet connection is unstable.
слышно?
Я очень плохо слышу, почти ничего не понимаю.
Sorry, I can't really hear you.
Да.
М,
Но не слышно меня, так кто-то другой говорит сейчас.
Ребят,
Я повторяю, если слышно, чтобы бывает начал.
Да, давайте тогда, я прошу техническую группу
Sorry, the tech team, please take care of it because we can't really hear anything from Elvis.
или Тимофея.
Maybe we can pass the mic over to Zhenya or to Timofey. Zhenya, would you like to go first? Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. As for state censorship, I think we don't really need to discuss it. I mean, it's quite clear what we're talking about when we say state censorship. It does not concern our project because we are a small independent project, or vice versa, we are a small independent project because we don't want the state to censor us in any way. So when we founded our group, we decided that as soon as it concerns us, for example, our actresses find themselves in blacklists or we are forced to change our topic, this will be the end of our group. So our group is formatted in that way that we don't have to make this choice. The only thing we faced is they show the finest, the brave falcon that the Culture TV channel wanted to present. But unfortunately, although the TV channel employees really loved the show and they wanted to include it in the news, but it was not included because the topic was sensitive. It was about ISIS, terrorism. This is a dangerous topic and everybody is afraid of it. But frankly speaking, this is hardly censorship. As for the other thing, the public censorship, the censorship from the public institution, or what we call in Russian the new ethics, which I think is non existent, is just the old ethics, the normal ethics. It is hard for me to speak because I'm a representative of those dangerous feminists who are going to be offended with every word. And I think that now in Russia, we are still in, in one of the previous stages. I feel like they're lagging so much behind from Europe. I feel like we're still in the forest, so in the dark forest, so to speak. Like in Europe or in the United States of America, a person can write something on Twitter, then he or she will be cancelled and banned on Twitter. And in Russia, theater is extremely conservative, and the public, the society is also extremely conservative. So I think we are 5 steps behind this problem, so to speak. So I think we have to discuss the situation that we have here now. And if we are just afraid of the activists who will come and ban all real art, then we will just stop ourselves from doing anything. And as for insults and for those who are insulted or offended, I think this is just human. For example, we made a show which touched upon the topics of Islam, religion, and we did our best not to, well, it wasn't about not insulting anyone, but since we don't have any Muslims among our team, that was our responsibility as artists to talk about a painful and a very sensitive topic for people. And religion is a sensitive topic, not just in the 21st century. We discussed every letter in the script. We discussed every letter in the script with imams. We gathered small focus groups with young people who are Muslims, and we listened to their feedback. We considered their feedback. It wasn't artistic feedback; it was just ethical, just human, basically. So they told us like this is not really the right way to put it. It can offend people who will come to the show. And among our audiences, we do have Muslims. So the feedback was, you make us look idiotic, and this is not true. This has nothing to do with the reality. We said, of course, yeah, surely we will remove it. And when, for example, men come to our show and their feedback is, we felt so bad, we felt like we are to blame for all women, for all the things that women suffer. We said, sorry, that was not what we meant. This is your perception as audiences, and here we cannot be responsible. We are always ready to talk about it. We are always ready to discuss things, but we can't be responsible for people being offended. Zhenya, did I get it right that there are people who do have the right to get offended, and there are those who are deprived of this right? So, for example, if the performance was not about Islam, but about the Russian Orthodox Church, for example, which is a kind of a dominating force in Russia, which has a strong position in Russia, I can completely imagine a show, a performance that would touch upon the issues related to the Orthodox Church, and this show could offend the those practicing the Orthodox religion.
Же понимает правду по-своему.
And again, when you say it's not true, it has nothing to do with reality. Truth is a very subjective thing. Everybody understands truth differently. What would you do in this case? So, do we believe that the world is divided and we agree with it? There are different groups in our society, and some of them are a bit less equal, some of them are a bit more equal, and some of them do have the right for resentment, for ressentiment, for being offended. No, of course not. I hope that we do not do journalism or we do not do activism. This is far from the case in our projects, but I think that our boundary is set like it has to be set in good journalism. I mean, factual errors is not a good thing, right? So, if, for example, in the show we say that 100% of the priests in Russia practice violence and are alcoholics, then people have the complete right to come and say, guys, what are you thinking about? This is not true, right? So, if I just broadcast my opinion or the opinion of the team that this system is quite rotten and provide artistic and human arguments to support that, then of course I want these people to be in the audience. I mean, what is important is a dialogue. The dialogue can be heated, and anybody has the right to be offended. Anybody has the right to be insulted. Yeah, but the other question is, some people have the right to insult others, right? I mean, getting offended, of course, it's my right. There have been a lot of like areas where I felt offended and I just left and it didn't concern anyone. But the question is there any right to offend? Any right to insult? I mean, when we speak very strongly about some issues, it can cause some offenses.
Это все равно некое ограничение. Да?
Я не, ну, скажем так, мне кажется,
Well,
что
let me put it this way. I believe, and this is important for me personally. First of all, as an artist, I want to be equal with the person that I may offend, but I don't like the word really. But anyway, or the groups or the people I make statements about. So you shouldn't feel that you're above the battle. And these audiences should have the platform to answer. And in this case, the social media is this platform. So even if people will not answer you directly, you can at least, he or she can at least write on the social media. You have to be responsible for what you say, of course, and being responsible means that your interlocutors do have the right to contradict you, to provide their arguments. What I'm against are criminal cases for something said or for canceling people after they said something wrongly. So I think what we need is a dialogue, is a discussion. And of course, I do not want it to become, again, violence. Like, he said this thing.
все вообще негодяи, и мы их тоже.
Those, if you attend their performance, you will be persona non grata. Well, again, I think these are just basic human things. We should respect each other. Our dialogue can be very heated and should be very heated, but it is a dialogue. We are equal in this dialogue. For me, this is equally wrong when a big state institution says, we don't care about you girls, women, about minorities. We don't care about you and we don't want you in our theater. Who are you going to act if you're an actor with from Northern Caucasus? Are you going to act gastarbeiters? I mean, there are some actors who come to castings, to theaters, and an artistic director can freely say that, well, look at yourself, look at your body, look at your facial features. Who are you going to act here? No, goodbye. And the artistic directors can really say that, and this is it.
Меньше обижать. Это вопрос равности этого диалога, когда каждый человек несет
It's
ответственность.
about equality. Everybody in the dialogue should. So we should bear responsibility for what we say. We should be ready to hear what other people have to answer.
Женя сказал,
I
я
have a lot
захотела
of questions to what Zhenya said. I will ask just one. I'm afraid to forget it later on. You said that you have a very small independent team, the So-So Daughters, which is protected from the state censorship. But the Dog Theater, for example, is also an independent venue. It's a small project, but it was censored, right?
сейчас, всего этого избежать. У меня уверенности
Я-
нет.
Are you
Мне-
sure you will be able to avoid it? No, when I mean we are safe from that, I mean artistically. Of course, I can be beaten out in the street, but it's quite hard to force me to cut some pieces from my show. I will just close the show. I will stop performing it. But of course, in Russia, nobody is safe from any kind of pressure. But in our case, it is impossible to, intervene into the artistic content.
Наладилась связь.
Elvis, what about your connection? Yeah, I'm on the phone now. I'm connecting from the phone. Yes, we can. Is it better for me to speak Russian or speak English? I'm passing the mic to you because you matter in this dialogue as a person who works a lot out in the West. You work in the West, and the reality of that life, which is widely discussed in Russia, is not some theory, but these are the conditions of your life and your work.
В России, да, по поводу того, что
And in
цензура
Russia, we hear a lot of arguments that censorship could come only from the state and the public censorship is impossible. I just wanted to ask you, what do you see as a trend in the West? Now many people see start seeing this public censorship as a threat. So what is your opinion? What do you think? You're right. I think there are two types of censorship. The first kind comes from the state, and the other kind comes from the theater community itself. For example, for the first time in my life, I experienced censorship
В 1983 году
in
Я-
1983. I was a student back then. I was a beginning artist back then. And
это
I was put in a psychiatric ward because I thought differently from others. This is a little known fact from my biography. I refused to go to the Soviet army because many soldiers were directed to Afghanistan. I said that I was a pacifist. I had different views, and I was kept in a psychiatric ward, which is in the Soviet time was little different from a prison. And of course, the goal was to disqualify me, to spoil my reputation at the very beginning. And I see it also as censorship, but it originated from the state, from the power. Something very similar happened to me 30 years later in 2015 in Germany, when I didn't share the enthusiasm about the open borders of the European Union country members, and I was disqualified again. I was called a toxic person, and many artistic directors of many theaters called for boycotting me.
формулировал интендант
The
одного
intendant of one of the festivals in Salzburg said, "Elvis, you are done," which was a very short way to put it. And this second event also had the goal of killing me as an artist because I have different views which do not fit the discourse of the overall theater community. So yes, you're right. There are two kinds of censorship. Theater community or intellectual community. I think the community is broader. It's not just the theater people, if I understand it right.
Западе
В тренды не только театрального сообщества, но более-менее
So I think here we're talking about trends not just of the theater community, but about the overall kind intellectual trends of the public.
западноевропейской культуры.
So I think these are
Дело же не только в театре.
trends of the culture. It's not just about theater. I don't think that in literature or in cinema it is different, or in contemporary art. I think these trends are the same all over. Yeah, right. The left-wing discourse in Western art and Western universities has monopolized the whole territory of thinking, of art production. I would even say that left discourse is a way of business now, is a way of making money. Even very young artists understand
они могут получить доступ только если они
they
соответствуют
understand that they can gain access to the profession only if they share this leftist agenda. The left-wing discourse became business for me. And for me, this is evident, completely evident. One of the examples to quote would be Schlangensief, the champion of the left-wing ideology. As we remember,
буржуа
he staged his shows only in the richest bourgeois theaters in the West, the same theaters where I was employed. Some of the people spoke about it quite cynically, saying, "Who has money enough to buy a scandal?" So they bought Schlangensief to buy a scandal and to buy publications in the media. And any other opinions are just disqualified.
Конечно, я по ходу дела как-то сразу начинаю задаваться вопросом, конечно,
As I listen to you, I start to wonder. I mean, these theater scandals, of course, can be afforded only by huge theater institutions, but a scandal as such, I mean, if it was set up in a poor Romanian town, it wouldn't make any sense there, right? So here it's not just about the amount of money for which you can buy a scandal,
благополучном обществе, которым является, скажем,
but it is
общество
also about the reach, the affluent society, which is, for example, the Austrian society. This is precisely the audience which the left-wing artist addresses in their work. Let's imagine an artist coming with the same work to a very poor African country. It's unclear who he or she is going to provoke there, right? I believe you're absolutely right here. When I was a program director of the Vienna Festival, I felt this inner contradiction all the time. On the one hand, we built the program to have as many as possible provocative, left-wing, anti-bourgeois, anti-capitalist agenda. But on the other hand, for this anti-capitalist statement, we need to pay a huge fee. And the brighter this anti-capitalist statement is, the stronger the artist who makes it, the bigger the money you pay. And I thought, oh my God, we don't even have enough money to buy this anti-capitalism because we just do not have enough euros to pay for it. Yes, and it is quite ironic that what is allowed is only one perspective, one point of view. Especially in German-speaking theaters, they boast, they take pride in being political theater, but I worked for a few decades there and I haven't seen any political theater there because I think a political theater hinges on an open discussion of all points of view, not just one. It is a fiction. It is an imitation of the political theater. So for me, it is censorship too. The art space, the art scene in the Western art is the same prison, but with different rules. Thank you. I understand what you're talking about, but I have another question. And it is a question I'm struggling with personally myself. We can all readily say that we are pro discussion, we want to support discussion, but there are some things which we believe are axioms, and we are not ready to discuss these issues. For example, I am not ready even to discuss whether a woman is equal to a man. I mean, if somebody poses this question, I just stop the discussion. I think there is no subject for discussion here. Like, what should the position of women be in the society? Or should black men have the same rights as the white man? I don't see it as a question. I think these questions have been resolved already. We have moved on as a society.
который отделяет
So for me, there is some line by which I differentiate axioms from questions to be discussed. And there are other people who say, for us, this boundary between axioms and what needs to be discussed is different, is in a different place.
о том, что
For example, a question about refugees and the need to welcome refugees in the affluent
интеллектуальным
countries. A lot of people in the theory community say we do not just even want to discuss this question because for us it is solved. For us, it's an axiom.
перенесена в некое другое пространство.
So in our theater, the discussion is possible, but in a different space. And for us, this space is not for polemics. We shouldn't discuss it.
Они носят уже не
So it's not that debates are prohibited, it's that certain questions are considered as solved. This is what I believe, this is how I see it. And the mismatch, or misfit is about where this boundary goes, right? So it's in different places for everyone. Timothy, would you like to jump in? Would you like to join our discussion?
при этом не
You're a very typical and at the same time atypical representative of the theater world. Quite recently, you personally experienced real censorship with your show. There was a huge scandal around Tannhäuser stage in the Novosibirsk Opera and Ballet Theater, and this scandal became
как стал работать в западном мире, я помню,
I
что
think widely known even before you started to work in the West. When I insisted on your three sisters to be included into the Vienna festival, I introduced you as that director who staged that show.
нет, и ты уже
But more than 5 years have passed since then, and you have already worked in European countries over that time. At the same time, you keep working in Russia, of course, too. So maybe you have your own stance on these issues. Well, you have touched upon different topics already, and they, I think, require a very detailed discussion. I wanted to go back to what Zhenya said,
В такую
actually.
формулировку.
I don't really believe in this wording that a performance can be insulting. I don't really believe it. I think this is a
Обидно.
cunning formula. So when you say somebody can get offended, it sounds like kindergarten to me. I mean, we're all adults. Of course, contexts are different, including my show Tannhauser. People who got offended because of it didn't even see it. I don't understand this mechanism as such. I mean, how can you get offended by a performance? A show is a space for polemics, for discussion. And for example, personally,
Да, а оно
I
же всегда может быть от лукавого.
don't tend to overload with responsibility
И
every statement of mine. I mean, I do make different statements in my show, but I do not like believe in everything I say as if that was a holy scripture. No, I think a show is about different things. Like theater can be talented or not that talented. It can be gripping or not.
это с Тангейзером понятно, что это было дело, ну,
And with
не просто.
Tannhauser, of course, it was a case. It was not a theatrical case. It was a political case, of course. But the politics there was mingled with aesthetics, right? Yeah, it all just started at chaos. It was a kind of a big game. The Minister of Culture jumped in and behaved in a very weird manner, I think. They protected the priests for some reason and not the artists, although the Minister of Culture. I think that discussion was not that much about arts. And thank you very much. I remember you protecting my show on the state TV channel in a talk show. And then I remember the court rulings because the court actually said that I was guilty of the scenes of the main character of the show. Can you imagine that? Yeah, so it turned out they were unable to differentiate between the position of the director and the position of the character in the world that the director imagined. So that was their inability to read the theatrical text, so to speak, even on the most basic level.
исключить, что это неумение читать театральный текст на элементарном уровне, оно как бы со всех
But this
сторон
inability to read arts, to understand arts, is a danger that we are facing, not just from the Orthodox community, but through from political activists too. Not all activists know a lot about theater, about arts. So I think we need to differentiate two things here. I think artists do have the right to offend those they want to offend, but at the same time, sometimes artists do not mean offending anyone. This is just in the eyes of the audience. The audience misread the intention of the director. The audience misinterpreted the show, but they are offended. They do feel offended. And they start to engage. court legal mechanisms or public mechanisms sometimes, because sometimes it's just enough to share the story on social media. And I see it. I see it a lot that social media distributes the information, any information, in a few seconds, and this information gets distorted with every share.
того произведения, о котором идет речь.
And
А знают
those who
они
are offended indeed very
правильно понять,
rarely
что вот эти
see the show. So they don't see it, but they do get offended. What they interpret the show
фотографии, спектакли,
based just on photos of the show, on the pictures published online. They don't know the context.
конечно, очень опасная ситуация, как мне кажется.
And this is a very dangerous situation, I think.
Ну, с искажениями надо
Конечно,
бороться.
искажение.
С искажениями надо бороться, да.
Yeah,
Когда
these are distortions we need to fight, I'm sure. So sometimes they put words into your mouth, and this is wrong, of course. We have to find it. And as for offenses, I'm not sure. They have the rights for their experiences, I believe.
В Мюнхене, да, в
I remember
Цюрихе,
that you also worked in Munich, in Zurich, now you're working in Berlin.
ограничениями в ходе репетиционного процесса.
Have you faced any limitations in the rehearsal process? Did you feel that there was any kind of boundary that you cannot step over,
Свободным человеком.
or you
свободным.
felt quite free? No, I haven't felt any limitations, but there was one case in Zurich. I'm sorry that I've mentioned the city and the theater it was in. So after the premiere, I got a very long letter from the chief dramaturg who redirected this email to me. It was addressed to the theater, it was sent to the theater. One of the audience members wrote this email. That was an email based on Nora or the Puppet House. And there was an episode, a kind of a party, where all characters got together for a Christmas party that played certain toys, and they had a nanny who was acted by an artist who works as a choreographer and as a dancer in this theater. So that was an extra. That's what we call extras. We needed those extras. So that girl acted the nanny. She's not an Afro-American, an Afro-Swiss girl, can I say that? So her skin was not completely white. And the theater received an email from a very insulted Afro-American. They said, "What did you do? You used a black girl to act a nanny, so we are second-tier people for you." That was the first serious big email that we got. She shared her whole biography in that email, how she fights oppression and so on and so forth. And then she added, and in general, this party, this Christmas party, that was the party in the Italian embassy. They're all white people there, no Koreans, no other nations. So this is how you imagine the international scene.
толерантный, политикally корректный, вот такая
So you're not tolerant,
ниша в драматургскую.
you're not politically correct. And the chief dramaturg told me, "I don't know how to answer this email." I said, "Well, we're accused of racism. We need to answer somehow." And they asked me to compile an answer. And my answer was, "Your letter contains a lot more
У меня не было другой
racism
актрисы.
than my performance." And I chose the black girl just because I didn't have any other actresses. I was the only actress that was available at that point.
То есть неприятная, на самом деле.
That
Вот,
was quite unpleasant. That's true. I'm not sure what this audience member felt. Of course, we didn't put the census into the show. Had we had another girl, another actress available, we would have taken her. So, yeah.
Последствий этого не было, да?
But there were no consequences after that, right? You just needed to answer the
Ответил, что
email.
я
Maybe there were. Well, I just wrote an answer. I heard you, but you misinterpreted what you saw on the stage. And it's weird to accuse me of racism. That was my answer. It was quite polite, of course.
Считает, что на все такие обиды надо отвечать, потому что
Well,
э,
it's interesting that the theater believes that all such accusations have to be answered. We remember from the Soviet times how many letters all institutions received, and sometimes they contained quite absurd accusations. Well, I asked the theater, do you have to answer this email? And they said, like, well, it's such a long email. We don't want her to say that we ignored her. But I think it could have been ignored, but they were afraid to do it.
э,
Thank you, Timofey. Since we have international audiences, those who are listening to us,
спикеров вещи
I
объяснять.
think need some things to be explained, some things that we think are evident. For example, as for Tannhauser, could you please just in a nutshell share that story? Yeah, sure. In 2015, we released this show in the Novosibirsk Opera Theater. Then we had two shows. We had two runs around a month or 2 months. There was an accusation filed against the show that it was offending the feelings of the believers. So this is the actual words of the article we have officially in the Russian legislation. Then there was a hearing, the public hearing, but the court did not find any illegal elements in the show, so the court ruling was positive for us. But despite that, the Ministry of Culture Medinsky
выступил в защиту
decided to protect not the theater, but the priests, the church. So his decision was to cancel the show, and it caused a huge scandal because the whole theater community, despite their views, despite their positions, supported the director and supported
Борис
the
Михайлович
theater.
на его
But at the same, the artistic director was fired, and he was replaced by Kechman, who removed the show. That was the first thing he did. The performance was shown 2 more times in the process of the court hearings. So in total, we showed it around 4 times only. So this is the story.
Да, и по
Thank
ходу
you.
дела, Алвис, тебе еще короткий вопрос.
Elvis, there is a short question to you.
Какими-то цензурными проблемами.
Have you faced
Почёва.
any censorship now as you staged Gorbachev at the Theater of Nations?
Короткий ответ нет.
The short answer is no, no censorship. I don't understand the Russian rules of the game. That's completely true. I'm saying that completely sincerely. I've had the chance to watch some of the Russian case shows, and there are shows in the selection which I can't imagine even in many Western countries now. Because of censorship, you mean?
Понятие цензура. А ты не мог бы привести
In the
примеры?
broader sense of the term censorship, could you please quote the examples? I think it would redirect our conversation. Boris, first of all,
Борис Дмитрия Крымова, да?
by Dmitry Krimov, Boris. Yeah. Well, in the States, in Germany, such a show will never be released. Only if the director decides to commit a suicide, like he decides that, or she decides that this is the last show in their career. What do you mean exactly? What is dangerous in this show?
Его смотрят
Because Russian audiences watch it like without any fear or without any strong emotions. I haven't heard about any like accusations or claims either from the state or from the audience. Yeah, this is exactly what I don't understand in the Russian rules of the game. At the same time, I heard that
Да,
half of the festival, Mansky's festival, was closed yesterday in St. Petersburg. So I can't understand it. You have very sophisticated rules of censorship. I don't understand them. Well, I can understand some of the things. Vitaly Mansky is a famous documentary director,
Председатель, значит, вот этого арт-док-феста, это фестиваль
and
документального
he is the artistic director of Art Doc Fest, a documentary film festival. But here, he is a persecuted person by the state, and he has been for a while. So sometimes these bans, these cancellations happen not because of what you do right now, but because you have a certain standing, so to speak, or you have a certain background.
сделал некие высказывания, снял некие
So basically, you are banned or you are persecuted for the statements you did before or for the films you did before. And then they find a very formal excuse. So in this case, the formal
социальной дистанции.
excuse why the festival was cancelled was the violation of social distancing and people not wearing masks at the opening of the festival. At the same time, we know that there are events taking place in stadiums
Найти какой-то формальный
where
повод для того,
people do not wear masks at all. So this is about the state being able to find ways to punish you for what you did like 2 or 3 years ago.
цензурные запреты
So
со
as for
стороны
censorship from the state, here it is more or less clear.
понимаешь, какую-то оппозиционную
If you take a stance, if you're opposed to the power, if you're opposed to the state, then they will always be able to find a formal reason to cancel your book, to cancel your film, to ban you from presenting your book at a book fair, so on and so forth.
да, который мог бы в западном контексте сделать только
And
самоубийца.
with Boris, it's more interesting. You said that such a directed making such a film in the West would commit a suicide. Why is that so? I don't see anything dangerous in this film.
ну, а,
Yeah,
нап-
sure. For example, Angela Merkel in Germany has been in power the same number of years as your president, around 20 years. She did everything to make herself irreplaceable. And she's using the same methods, the same populist agenda. And if somebody did a show with so many hints at Angela Merkel, then no intendant would show such a performance in their theater. It would be impossible. Well, it's hard for me to say. Maybe it could be shown. I think there is a crucial difference between Russia and Germany, and it's not in the number of years that Merkel and Putin are in power, but in the fact that
Независимость судов.
in Germany the courts are independent, they do work. There are independent media that can criticize Merkel's moves, and the elections are free. So, however sophisticated her politics is, still the elections are legitimate. They are free. If somebody is staying in power for so long,
Но это я скажу апропо.
I think this does not resemble our situation at all. Yeah, but we are discussing theater. I do not really understand why you go back to press and journalism all the time. Theater is completely different from that. Since medieval times, this is the area of carnival. This is the area of fools. So, Marina, in the theater, even your boundaries do not have the rights to exist in the theater. Yeah, I agree with you, but my main idea is that the space of art and the space of theater is the space that is not subject to the taxes of etiquette, of usual limitations of our everyday life. And this is quite a limited, quite a small space of freedom where you can do the boldest moves, the most provocative moves, even the things that nobody is going to like.
Именно внутри вот этих очень предлагаемых обстоятельств, да,
And you can do it in this convention,
сделать
which is called art.
в пространстве театра,
So, what you can do in an
имеешь право
exhibition,
сделать в обычной жизни. И на
in
этом
theater, is something you don't have the right for in your normal life, in your everyday life. And yes, this is why you compare theater to carnivals, to fools.
юродивому не может сделать
In the Russian culture, for example, since medieval times, the fools uh, have always been allowed to do much more than all other citizens, than all other residents.
который ему прощается то, что не прощается простым
So,
смертным.
like fools are pardoned for many things that other mortals are not allowed to do.
В мире, да, вот мне кажется, что мир искусства лет 10 тому назад был
I
гораздо
think that
более
around 10 years ago, the art world was much more, much freer, I would say, say in this term, in this sense, because I can see this world changing in front of our eyes for the past 10 years.
тем спектаклям, которые мы
And I
привозили.
make this judgment based on the performances which we bring to the Net Festival, for example. And around 10 years ago, they were extremely bold and like artists were not afraid of anything. But now we have to take into account a million of different circumstances, of different aspects. Now, I would like to ask every one of you in your work,
Которые стали происходить
do
в
you
последние
feel these changes that have begun to happen over the past few years? First, I wanted to ask Renia.
это ретроспектива, она не
She's
такая.
quite young, so for her, this background is not that big. So, Renia, do you feel any evolution? Do you feel any change in this sense?
Вот мы с Тимофеем примерно ровесники. У нас, мне кажется, ретроспектива одинаковая. Я
Well,
с удовольствием
actually, I think we are the same age with some of the other panelists, so we have the same background. I was I completely disagree with this idea of the sacred function of art. I think it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any difference whether I make a statement at a table or I make the same statement on the stage. For me, it's the same. For example, if I pretend to be a gay and I mimic a gay and that looks insulting, it's just as insulting at a dinner with my friends and on stage. This is something I like about the contemporary world, though I think that has always been the case because I think that uh, freedom is one thing and peacelessness or nastiness is a different things. Like some of the artists say, I'm better than others and I can do whatever I want. And the answers that we get from the public now is because they are starting to reclaim their voice. As for that Afro American lady, she saw what she saw. We can think that she's a fool or whatever, but I think it is a dialect and it is important. And I think nobody died because of a verbal exchange. So it's not about, you know, bowing and making excuses or saying I'm sorry before he did anything. No, but a dialect is important. And just as we make certain statements, the recipients see what they see. We say what we say, and they see what they see. And this is their right to answer, to respond. I think it harmed no one when we talk to each other, especially if we are talking about a big theater who has a PR department that can deal with that. And I think the problems of Russia are not in the fact that everybody has to say they're sorry, but it's either you say I'm sorry in front of Roman Kadyrov, who can cut your head off, or you just don't give a damn about everybody else. And you say, I do what I do and don't care. I think the environment is changing, the life is changing, and I think it's changing for the better in the public environment. It's not about offending or not offending. I don't like offending people in general. I mean, your statement can be harsh, and I'm quite harsh in my statements, and I would like to be even harsher uh, now as I speak, but you're so nice and I can't. But when you are harsh, you can get an answer back. This is okay.
На сцене?
If you can say something on the stage, be ready to say the same thing if, to the person's face, being one on one in an elevator or on the square in a public space.
Вы
But
понимаете,
Zhenya, wait, you're a theater person, you're a theater professional. You understand that in a show, the statement can have different layers of sense.
паники,
If a person, for example, mimics a gay
кого-то обидеть,
at,
это одна ситуация.
at
Есть
dinner, at the discussion, this is one situation. If on the stage somebody mimics a gay in this way, it can have completely different meanings, right?
того, чтобы осудить того человека,
And
который так себя ведет.
Да.
Понимаете? И
so this mimicking on the stage can also be like a condemnation of this behavior. I don't see any difference here. No, there is a difference. I mean,
объяснить, что он не имел в виду
at a
никого.
dinner table, people can engage in a dialogue. They can explain that they didn't mean it. In the performance, it is non-existence. And in Timofey Kulabin's case, this is what emerged. This is what happened. Timofey did not want to offend anyone. But nobody was offended, right? With Timofey Kulabin. There were a lot of offended people there. Well, who were offended? Nobody was really offended, right? Do you think real Orthodox people, their faith was shattered?
Смотри,
That's what they said. They said that it was painful for them to watch it. Well, I think Timothy actually staged a very Orthodox, a very Christian show,
и
and it
поэтому,
was perceived completely differently.
по которым мы живем в обычной жизни, к произведению искусства, произведению культуры, мне
So
кажется,
I think that the artworks, the culture works, have a different standing in our life because it's a much more difficult system of the aesthetic framework, so to speak. Well, I don't think so. This is my personal opinion. I think that absolutely every human statement, it can be anything, can be advertising, it can be a poster, it can be something that I say, I don't know, in a cafe. I think when I say, for example, when I say something now, I have completely different, a lot of layers of intentions. I say one things, you hear something different. Our guests, foreign guests, hear something else through the translation. So it's always multi-layered, and artists do have a chance to comment on what they do, and it's in the performance. For example, if I make an episode with this gay mimicking the behavior of gay people, then I can subvert it in the same episode. Or like 15 minutes after the show, I can enter the stage and start a Q&A session. And I have to bear in mind the whole context. The context is not just on the stage for this 1 hour, 15 minutes. The context is around us all the time. And I think it's disastrous, to disconnect us from reality. Like we are artists and other people are other people. Well, for me, this division is crucial because we can't judge an artwork by the same laws as we used to judge a TV program or an advertisement. What's more, I think even the laws we used to judge the entertainment sphere, blockbusters, genre films, and the laws that we use to judge the art house world are also very different.
разные как бы требования к ним.
And
Ну, например,
I
сейчас отвлечемся от цензуры.
use different standards to judge. Even if um, if, if we talk about a representation now, which is a different idea from censorship,
а,
if, for example, a TV host,
целыми
all TV hosts are white, cisgender, masculine men, then I will think it's wrong
репрезентативности,
because
да,
the idea of representation,
национальной,
gender, racial, ethnic is very important if we take TV hosts. But as soon as we transfer this idea of representation on a performance to a performance, it becomes
другим законам все
arguable because I think that performances work by different rules and the actors are selected by different rules. And a simple juxtaposition or a simple transferal of progressive and useful socially ideas
предназначенного, в общем, не очень
onto
широкой
art. And theater is not for broad audiences, right? By definition.
хорошую роль.
And I
И
think this application of the rules does not bring either aesthetic sense or political benefit. So I think we have to
взаимоотношения с некой реальностью, и оценки ее, и так далее. Они
fine tune our perception of artworks. And we shouldn't use the same template to measure very different areas of our life.
находятся в этом смысле в каком-то особом положении, но
And
множество
yes, in this sense, art is in a special position, but there are other areas of life which are also in a special position, and we have to take into account this speciality. This is also diversity.
ко всему, а пытаемся учитывать исторический и всякий иной контекст, когда о чем-то говорим.
So we
Вот,
have to take into account the context, the broader context.
например, одна из, и тут вот среди вопросов, которые сейчас
And
приходят,
among different questions that we get through the chat, the questions and statements, there is one remark which I think very just, that in Russia it's very difficult to talk about the problem of racism just because historically
к себе в
we
качестве рабов
haven't used
рабства,
black people as slaves, although we did have slavery, we did have serfs,
вот, но у
but
нас
the
нет
serfs were of the same nation as we were.
видения
So we don't have this experience historically, so we are not sensitive to these questions, and this is completely true. And
Russian case,
even if we
да,
turn to the Russian case program, Elvis, for example, said that he shivered when we was watching Boris, and I remember that I shivered when I was watching Andrei Moguchev's tale about the Lost Angel. There were a few episodes in it
ну, постсоветского, значит, больницы, госпиталя.
where
Вот.
nurses come on stage from a post-Soviet hospital, and those were male nurses, and in Russia they quite often are alcoholics, and what they drank was
У них так вот менялся цвет
some
лица. То есть
some kind of denatured alcohol or something like this, which changed the color of their faces. So Moguchi used this slight black face in the show. There is not even a hint in this show to the dark color
могу чувствовать.
of the skin of other nations.
И вся публика российская, которая сидит в зале, как тут же все узнает и правильно
And the
считывает
Russian public reads it rightly,
глазами.
interprets it the way it had to be. But when I was watching it through the eyes of an American or a French person,
Использовал некий прием, который,
I
в
thought,
общем,
oh my God, what has he just done? He used the trick which is not to be used now in contemporary theater. So this is what I meant by context. Contexts are different. Contexts are different in different countries. So very different things can be perceived as insulting.
контексте несет абсолютно иной смысл.
And the same
И
things
поэтому
in different contexts will be a completely different meaning. So we can't use one and the same template
жанрам, про разные
for
виды
different genres, for
деятельности, по разным
different activities of people.
необходима тонкая
They do
дифференциация.
not work. What we need is fine tuning. Sorry, may I say the last thing and I will keep silent for the rest of the day. I think now when you say we should use the same template, this is exactly what you do. You're using the same template to measure different areas of our work. How can I explain it? It's
Обязаны
not about everybody having to show Afro-Russians in every performance, fat people, very
ну, человек
thin
должен
people. I don't know what else. I mean, people just need to think about what they do.
сейчас страшно переживается о том,
I
что
mean, we can now be historical about diversity killing us, but it's not killing us. I'm still thinking about my female experience, like in our theater. We have around 0.1% of non-Slavic actors in our theaters, and actresses are very uniform in their bodies. If, for example, there is a plump actress, she is doomed to play funny characters, second-tier characters for her whole life. And this not and now in Russia, we are in the situation of dividing arts from the rest of our life. And at the same time, we do use this one and the same template. And I can't talk about Germany. I can't talk about the United States of America. All I can talk about is Russia. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if we have different people on the stage, whether they are represented. No representation is existent here for any minority. Nobody cared about it 40 years ago. Nobody cared about it 20 years ago. Nobody cares about it now. Everybody is extremely worried that some activists will come and prohibit everything
ну,
from
их 1,5
sex to
человека.
autistic interpretation. But there are 1.5 activists in Russia who are like, sorry, sorry, sorry. Can we sometimes show boys in a wheelchair in a performance? And I saw such a show, and I saw the reaction of the audience. There was a disabled boy in the audience, and he was completely hysterical. He was crying because that was the first thing he saw somebody like him on the stage.
Вот этого слова, а вы мне его немножко навязываете. Но ничего.
Sorry, I feel like you are putting words into my mouth. Special, special. Okay, you said the theater is special. I think what matters at school is also important in theater for children. What matters for the television also matters for theater. Not to be an idiot, not to be a dogmatist, not to be flat. So everybody, whatever their beliefs are, they shouldn't follow dogmas. I mean, whether you are a left-wing activist, you shouldn't follow dogmas. I mean, if you have a stupid show which has only like one meaning attached to it, then it doesn't matter whether it's feminist or right-wing or left-wing. Zhenya, you say that nobody cared about diversity, and
Российский артист, он
the
представлен
Russian artists are not represented. I mean, different kind of people are not represented on stage. Now, listening to you, I remember that, for example, one of the most important shows of my youth was Peter Fomenko's Volky and Ovce, based on Alexander Ostrovsky's play, where the narrative is about the merchant society. Of course, Ostrovsky described the Russian life.
совершенно культовым.
And in this show, which was extremely successful, which was staged back in the 90s, the Russian merchants were acted by Madan Jabrailov, Tagir Rahimov, Rustem Juskayev, Karen Badalov. So these are just the names I remember. And every one of these actors, every one of these artists had very non-Slavic appearance, so to speak. And in 1992, when I attended that show, when I watched this show, nobody in the audience even thought about the question whether representatives of other nationalities
играть русских
with
людей.
very particular appearance can act the Russian people or the Russian merchants. This question didn't even come to our heads. This is amazing. It seems like we were more prone to diversity than now. I don't think so. I think it was kind of internationalism, which was the heritage of the Soviet time, which we believed in. Like we had black artists, black actors who acted different Shakespearean roles at Rikins Theater, or Mr. Mahip, for example, who's still active. I'm not sure what his ethnic background is, but his dark skin color is not any kind of inhibition to him. He's quite active on the Russian scene. I don't want to say that this problem is non existent. I mean, maybe this is an attempt to divide people now. I mean, art has to connect people, art has to connect everybody and not to divide people into different groups. I mean, if somebody's careers are inhibited because of their identity, this should be a matter of discussion that
Корректным. Я как
should cause a scandal in the society. But all these discussions now don't seem quite correct to me because, like, I remember my experience and I think that this is not quite true. I think we're twisting the facts now. I think that the Russian theater community is not as closed as we want to think, but this could be a separate conversation. Sorry, only Zhenya answered my question whether you felt this evolution going on over the past 3 years. Evolution, I mean, towards harsher rules of the game for theater. Timothy and Alvis, please answer.
Или же это такая проблема долгоиграющая и
Or is
существовала?
it a problem that has always existed? Well, when you read theater magazines, I mean, published in Western Europe,
Последние годы они все меньше и меньше пишут
you
про
can see that over the past years, they write less and less about the questions of art, and they write more and more about ideology.
знаков, почему
That was
я
one of the signs for me. That was one of the reasons why I decided in my theater, based in Riga, to announce the rules of ethical behavior in the theater. That we do have the freedom of speech in our theater. It will be preserved like it has always been all the previous years with no limitations and so on and so forth.
в Латвии, я знаю, не только в Латвии, у нас этот текст
In
вызвал очень
Latvia, for example, this text caused a lot of discussion, a lot of debates.
президент страны обсудить
Even the
вот
president of the country invited me over to discuss it one on one. So Egilevits, the current president of Latvia, discussed this topic with me for an hour and a half.
Публиковал свое, как сказать, свое резюме, свое видение,
And
в котором он полностью меня
in the end,
поддержал.
he published his resume, his own vision, in which he completely supported me. He is a classical liberal, pretty much like me. I'm not a conservatist. I'm not conservative in my thinking. I'm liberal in my thinking. He's a Jew who emigrated in the 70s, and he studied at the German university. In our conversation, his first reference was to the most famous scandal around censorship. What happened to Fassbinder in the Frankfurt Theater? Marina, you may know this case, right? Fassbinder staged a show about a Jew
Бизнес на
who made a business on Holocaust in post-war Germany. And this show caused a huge scandal, but that was old Germany. It was in the 70s. And Fassbinder was a very left-wing person. But still, at the end, Joschka Fischer, who then became the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And back then, he was in a different position. And he said that such a point of view in the theater with a hint to anti-Semitism, it has a complete right to exist, and this show cannot be banned. Yes, we will come to the show with posters, but you can't ban the show. Egilevits's father is a Jew, and he said it was an example of democracy. This is an example of classical liberalism. Democracy doesn't work
высказаться. И
if all points of view cannot be voiced. Because when we just do this progressive act, so to speak, we follow a lot of rules, and one progressive position will be changed by an even more progressive position, which will kill the previous one, which will kill the first one.
сейчас внутри романа Достоевского «Бесы».
But we are now inside of Dostoevsky's The
Многих литературных
Possessed. Well, I think we are living through many different literary works,
на любую прогрессивную повестку
but
и
I
на
believe you are right that for every progressivist agenda, there may be even a more progressive critic. I
как бы
think that the danger of the situation is, however hard you try to follow this progressive agenda, you're risking you risk
консерватор, ретроград, не
start
имеющий
lagging behind it, and you will be accused as a conservative thinker, as somebody who has no right to vote. Yes, Marina, but the difference is that these people have the veto right in many countries, so they can just veto some people. And they just shut up everybody else.
говорила об этих, то есть вот как бы эта ситуация с cancel culture, ну, наивно думать, что
This
она будет
situation with the cancel culture,
миром самой левой повестки и более консервативным и правым миром, потому что она абсолютно очевидна, если уже включается cancel culture, она начнет работать и внутри
it
самой
has
левой.
always been a thing. And
Джоан Роллинг, которая
I mean, this can work on inside of the progressive agenda. John Rowling, for example, is quite a representative figure for this left-wing agenda.
в
But
какой-то
the
момент
cancel culture now is against her because at some point she offended
и
trans personas.
Левые люди из несколько иного спектра сочтут,
So
что
this is a fight of left-wing people with other left-wing people which are not left-wing enough. And I see a clear danger here. By the way, Zhenya says that we should provoke dialogue, we should support dialogue, and I completely agree with her. I think that this dialogue, this kind of respectful dialogue, is what provides for peaceful coexistence of people.
объяснение, что
But it would be
объяснение
quite naive to think that
этого
when
иногда
the artist explains themselves,
не являются, потому что противоположная сторона к нему не
then this
готова.
is a dialogue. No, this is not a dialogue because the other side is not engaged. If we remember Robert Lepage's show, that was a very humanistic performance about the difficult life of the indigenous people in Canada.
Ценность, в которой показаны
Yeah,
представители
this show introduced the background, the historical background, and the representatives of this minority, and how they're forced to exist in the contemporary Canadian society, how they need to fit into it. But despite the idea of the show, it was banned
внутри
because the representatives of this minority were acted by white actors.
спектакля, и никакие объяснения тут бы не помогли. Да, спектакль был
And
запрещен.
no explanations would be enough here. The performance was banned, was prohibited, and then in Paris, in Theatre du Soleil, Lepage was invited, and he staged this show again with French artists, with the artists of the Du Soleil Theatre, and it was not banned there. But as far as I remember, there were some scandals at the premiere.
Разрешилось неким образом, но тоже не до конца.
So the situation was resolved, but not fully.
В этом сюжете
And what I think is most important in this narrative is that Irian Nushkin, who invited Lepage over, is a representative of the old generation of the left-wing intelligentsia. And she also sees a lot of danger in the current situation.
только противоречие
So this is not just
между левым и правым.
tension between the old and the new world, between the left and the right. It's also tension between the old and the new generations in one and the same trend.
Левого
And
тренда
we can
тоже
see a lot of clashes inside of the current trend, and they are inevitable.
движение, конфликтов бесконечных.
I don't think that these continuous conflicts and these continuous tensions, I don't think that it is fruitful. I also support dialogue,
В рамках такого диалога.
and I think that now we are trying to exist in the framework of such a dialogue, although our positions are very different. Timothy, unfortunately, our time is almost over. We will have to finish soon. Timothy, do you have anything to add? Sorry, I didn't didn't give you space to talk. And we will have to take questions from the audience, probably. Tamara, if that's okay, could you please read them out? Marina, we can switch to the Q&A now. We have touched upon very different questions, and it's not like I'm ready to answer all of them.
Говорит, да?
So you're not ready to talk now, right? Yeah.
Нету ничего, мы тогда, наверное,
Okay.
перейдем к
Shall we switch to the questions from our audience?
Еще, простите, какие-то вопросы, Марина, я некоторые тебе
Sorry,
отправляла.
Marina, I sent you questions on the go.
какие-то пропустила, поэтому
Well, I asked some of them, but I missed some others. I think our chat has more comments than questions. And I think Alves answered the question about the manifesto of the New Riga Theatre. So this is answered, I think.
Мне кажется, это...
Well, I think, yeah, that was answered. Timothy, He's asked, Timothy,
Или других формах
what
цензуры.
do you think about other forms of censorship? More sophisticated than just direct pressure.
Коротко вопрос. И ситуация в России отличается в этом смысле
And there is a
от...
question whether the situation in Russia is different from the situation in the West. Sorry, Timothy, I wanted to add. So, is there any pressure maybe for the performance to sell better? But this is not censorship, this is something else, I believe.
Ты все равно часто находишься в ситуации определенного заказа, да, когда ты
Very
делаешь.
often, when you make a show, you understand that you are commissioned. You need to understand the context of the production, and this is not censorship. These are contractual relationships, basically. So you are just a contractor, and you need to discuss the rules. And I don't think this is censorship. Censorship is something different. Yeah. There was a long comment from Sergei Ostrovsky. It is important to understand what we mean by censorship and talk about state censorship and self-censorship. Other than that, this is just a conversation about the debates in the society. Formally, the Constitution of the Russian Federation bans the state censorship, makes it illegal. The court did not find any violations in Tannhäuser, but the theater does not exist in the vacuum. Conservative activists are quite active in many countries. I think the word self-censorship is really important, while in the Russian context it may be key.
Конечно, формально у нас цензуры нет,
Of course, formally, we do not have any censorship,
да,
and
но
this is the hypocrisy of
как будет
the
говорить,
situation. Like any public official will tell you there is no censorship, but the phenomenon of self-censorship is extremely widespread, and all intendants, all artistic directors of theaters who are responsible for the budgeting, for the finance,
которые они иногда
they know
рискуют,
what the red flags are. Sometimes they risk to go beyond them, but they understand that
ну, например,
it,
какой-то новый
it
финансовый
will
проект,
bring a lot of risk on them. A new audit or new sophisticated forms of pressure.
закон
It's
финансовый.
quite hard not to violate the law in finance in Russia because it's very absurdist.
Таких примеров очевидной цензуры,
And
да, не так уж много, хотя они,
there
кстати
are
говоря,
quite few examples of direct censorship, though they exist.
фактически спектакль, который назывался «Сбой системы».
For example, recently, one of the shows was banned, which was called A Glitch in the System, made by young artists, by young actors from Ryzhakov's
Игра слов, она
group, and it was about the Stanislavski system.
обычно переводят как, на английский как method, а у нас мы используем
So it
слово
was about the Stanislavski method. So maybe it would be better to translate the show as a glitch in the method. So
представители власти, скажем
when
так,
the public officials saw this title, A Glitch in the Method, A Glitch in the System, they thought it was about the system of the country in general, and they just banned it because of the title. This is a tragic, comical situation, I think. On the one hand, it's tragic, but on the other hand, it's almost comical.
примеров,
But this is one of the few examples of direct,
она, конечно, оказывается,
transparent censorship. In most cases, it is hidden,
дальше ты сам уже считывай
like
сигналы.
there are some hints, and then you need to read the signals somehow. So self-censorship works a lot, that's true. But there was a question about the Russian scene, right?
В то время, где
Unlike the
правила
Soviet time, by the way, where the rules of the game were quite clear and well known to everybody, everybody knew that a lot of things were banned.
немножко
It was easier in many senses.
более широко трактуется или цензура в кавычках. То есть
This
это вот
question about censorship, again, I think censorship can be understood very broadly. The box office censorship could also be seen as censorship. No, I think this is a completely different question. Box office is not censorship.
как будет продаваться спектакль.
The question about how the performance is going to sell. Well, there are a lot of factors that influence whether the performance is going to sell. It has nothing to do with censorship. Well, the only thing I can think of is when there is an artificial scandal around the performance, which is stirred in order to ignite the sales. When we say the box office censorship, I think this is it.
Да, про искусство
This
театральное.
is a canny kind of turn in our conversation. This is not a problem of censorship. It's a different problem, I think. And we will discuss it at a separate event, hopefully. Elvis, you wanted to say something? Marina, by the way, I think you are wrong. The box office censorship now is directly related to censorship, and it is proven in many places in many theaters. Theaters become more and more left wing, and huge groups, huge social groups do not attend these theaters at all. This is what happened with Winter Kammerspiele, the theater where staged full shows.
Германии.
I think they had the best actors in Germany. But over the past years, German critics praised it a lot, but I saw that they couldn't sell even half of the tickets. And I had never seen anything like this before.
Это
This
не
is a very interesting program, but I think this is not censorship.
театр в
Да,
это
да.
пойти.
This was the voluntary decision of the theater, right?
Ваша формулировка театра,
I'm
что
surprised with your reading of theater, that it has to be a dialogue, a respectful dialogue. But this is very far from how I see theater.
мой уважаемый Касторф именно иронически по этому поводу назвал происходящее в немецком театре. Он говорил, это место
And
спектакля.
what is happening in Germany was sometimes ironically called a student seminarium. I think a theater is not a dialogue, it's provocation by very subjective point of view of the artist. And audiences have to decide for themselves what they want to do with it. A theater is not a didactic school to be attended, so it's not about telling people what's the right way to
Театра
do.
как дидактической школы. Мне эта идея тоже глубоко чужда.
But as for theater as didactic school, this is not my position. Well, you both called dialogue a platform for dialogue.
Тоже возможен. Я
No, well,
говорю,
I think that a dialogue is possible in a theater, but I was talking about dialogue as such in the society around the theater. Yeah, but it is different.
и самого
So I
произведения.
mean that the performance has to be discussed, an art piece has to be discussed.
Угодно.
An art piece can be a dialogue, it can be different, it can be anything. Theater can be anything. This is the only thing I can say. If Jerzy Grotowski or Antonin Artaud were alive and you told them that the theater was a space for dialogue, they wouldn't understand what we're talking about.
Да, но мы все говорим разное, я просто хочу
Well,
это...
we all have different positions, yes. I think all the four of us mean very different things.
в чем-то не совпадает.
Я вот сейчас, прости, Марина, сейчас получила от
Sorry,
Марии
Marina. I got a message from Maria Rybakina, director of the Golden Mask. maybe you could quote some examples of the censorship in
Сообщение.
different regions where performances are cancelled due to censorship. Do you know any examples?
Мне как раз проще приводить примеры из западной жизни, потому
Well,
что
it's easier for me to quote examples from the Western life because I don't really know much about the provincial theater life.
в тонких запретах,
I
понимаете,
don't know anything about this loud bans, something that would be equal to Tannhäuser.
но я
To
понимаю,
Tannhäuser.
вот эти запреты, они происходят именно на уровне принятия решения директором или интендантом
So the
театра.
decisions there are made by directors or intendants of theaters, and this is what I think is self-censorship, and it's quite hard to.
Некоторые вещи люди даже, наверное, не предлагают, потому что понимают бессмысленность.
Yeah, self-censorship is really dangerous. Directors cancel certain things, like they believe it could be dangerous for themselves and for everybody working for the theater. Like if I am a theater director, then I also have responsibility for others, for other people. I understand that if I come with an extremely bold proposal to a provincial theater director who struggle financially, and I will tell them, hey, let's be bolder. Can you make
чем сам директор. Мы, кстати говоря, это видим по...
are you bold enough? I don't think this would be relevant. So this is I don't mean this about Timofey because I don't believe that his idea was provocative in the first place. But I think that the main person who suffered in this story is the director of the theater, right? He was fired. So this self-censorship for artists begins on the stage of approaching the theater director. Every artist understands that they are going to play a double game. It's not their risk. I mean, writers risk themselves when they write something. As for theater people,
на других людей.
they do not risk themselves.
Финансового администрирования.
Who risks are administrators, are directors who bear the responsibility for budgeting. There are some comments in the chat too. They may not be related to what we're discussing now, but there is a comment about using the terms like left wing, right wing, left and right. They have a different meaning now. And for example, when Elvis uses the term leftist or left wing, what do you understand by this term when you said that? Do you mean
Века, мультикультура.
equality, human rights, multicultural learning, multiculturalism, more voices to be heard? What do you mean by that, Elvis? We thought that you meant something different when you said left. Well, whatever I say, everybody will understand. However, they are ready to understand. I have already learned that from my experience. I just read the comment.
Или все-таки чуть-чуть взять времени.
So, shall we stay here in the broadcast or shall we switch to the informal part to let our guests turn on their cameras? Unfortunately, we didn't manage to read out all the comments and all the questions. There are a lot of them.
Мне кажется, что мы можем уже...
I think we can wrap up, finish the official part of today's discussion.
У человека будет возможность
And
задать...
I suggest that we promote our attendees to panelists. And if you feel like your question hasn't been answered, you're welcome to ask these questions orally. Unmute yourselves.
То давайте мы...
I think if we more or less exhausted the chat, I suggest that we switch to the informal part. Yeah, there were a lot of views on this topic, so let us finish our broadcast on social media now. And we will have around 10 minutes for the Russian case guests to share their opinions